and we go to South Dakota and Oregon and Washington and Michigan, and then we're going to Washington, D.C. to take back the White House. Yeah!
Yeah! Thank God for Howard Dean. The screamer is now a saint. The man many are used to hear shouting, just saying something in the calmest of voices. I tell you, it's deafening. It was during a discussion of this whole budget mess with pollster Scott Rasmussen. And all I could say is prepare for your jaw to drop, because I want you to remember the guy saying it. Roll it.
Somebody has to tell the middle class that either your taxes are going to go up or your programs are going to get cut, or else we're going to go into financial oblivion. And nobody really wants to tell them that.
Yeah! Well, that's the best I could do. Anyway, the screamer is a soothsayer. He's gone from throwing grenades to now heaving heavy doses of something called reality. Howard Dean says we have a choice. Everyone's taxes go up or a lot of programs get cut. Either or. The rich can't pay for it all. So it is only simple math that the middle class and others will have to pay as well. The government has gotten so big, its commitment so spread out, that it is time to spread the tax wealth and quit spreading the you-know-what. You want big government, you're going to have to pay for big government. He's right. The good doctor from Vermont knows his math. More than $1 trillion going out that coming in year after year cannot be sustained, so more are going to have to pay. Now, I don't know if the former presidential candidate had a weak moment, but I hope he passed along this bit of reality and wisdom to the president that we've got right now, because Barack Obama is making a huge stink about those $85 billion in automatic spending cuts that are coming March 1st. Cuts that aren't really cuts at all. And in the scheme of a $3.5 trillion budget, barely a rounding error on a rounding error at best. Nevertheless, the president busy showcasing props to make his case the cuts are cruel, that it's going to mean fewer meat inspectors, Armageddon at airports, you name it. Listen to Howard Dean, Mr. President, misleading taxpayers into thinking we can keep going on like we have been. That is even more cruel. Just ask Michelle Field, Whalen, Guy Benson. Guy, I think this time the screamer has spoken softly and loudly. What do you think?
He has, and as a matter of fact, Governor Dean has been making this point on several occasions since the election, conveniently, but he has said this on a variety of different networks, saying the middle class eventually are going to have to get hit. And unfortunately, if you're a middle-class American right now watching, he's right, unless his party can get over their metaphysical inability to deal with the real driver of our debt, which is the bloated entitlement state and the unfunded liabilities coming down the pike. You are going to have to raise taxes on everyone. So, Neil, I think that if Republicans are smart in the next election cycle, they'll go up to all the various Democrats running for office who want to continue running on this lie that we can just stick it to the rich and say, do you disagree with Governor Dean and his assessment? And if you do, how do you make the math work exactly?
Well, I think, you know, Michelle, if you think about it, Governor Dean has just said what I think a lot of other prominent Democrats, including the president on down to Harry Reid, Nancy Pelosi, really also concur with in their heart of hearts. They're just not saying it, that the math doesn't add up, that you could tax the rich at 100% and it wouldn't come close to covering our needs. And this is more than just a reallocation problem, to quote Senator Harkin. This is just a bad math problem, and that we can't sustain this. And that if we want a government this size, and there is an argument to be made in some polls that a lot of Americans do want a bigger, better government, then you're going to have to pay for it. And he's pointing the way. Then you're going to have to tax a lot more people to provide it. What do you think of that?
Exactly. Look, the path that we're on right now is just not sustainable. And I think it's time that Americans make the choice. Either we go the path that Europe has gone down, where we have a stagnant economy, where you see tons of unemployment, where you see tons of people taxed to death, or we can go down the other path, which is a more economic freedom, where people can decide what they want to do with their money, where government isn't taking care of you from cradle to grave. And I think it's about time we make that hard choice, because this is not sustainable.
You know, Michael, he could also be stating something. Look, Americans might welcome that choice. They might be willing to pay a little bit more if they have a government that will do a little bit, presumably a lot more, and they might be okay with it. But he's throwing it out there that that is inevitable. So what are we going to do? What do we do?
Well, and Neil, I think there'd be a lot of people that pay a little bit more. We've averaged about 18.5% over the last 50 years going to the federal government. I think if you went to the American public and said we could fix everything by paying 20%, everybody'd say okay. But the path that we're on is more like 25, 26, 27%. And that means we're going to cut our investment in our economy in half. Over the time, that's a catastrophe for our kids. But as Willie Sutton said, he robbed banks because that's where the money's at, and the middle class is where the money's at.
It is where it's at. I don't know if your view is left and right on this. I guess I want to get back to the basic math argument, because half the people in this country don't pay any federal income taxes. I'm not here to badger the point that many of them genuinely shouldn't. That the retirees, some are military, some have gotten to the point where they have paid more than a life into the tax system. But all I know, when I got out of grad school, that number was in the 20s, and now, as I say, it's approaching 50%. And I only got out of school just a few years ago. Okay, I lied about that. But my point is, guys, is that the reality is that is simply not sustainable. You can't just hit up that 50% or more to the point that 1 or 2 or 5% they're paying most of this, that is not sustainable. And the governor is really stating the obvious, right?
Right. Well, here's the thing, Neil, and this gets back to the point that was just made. What the Democrats have been promulgating now for the last several years and several election cycles, they've got this story going, which is if we just ask the rich to pay a little bit more of their fair share, we'll have a balanced approach and fix the problem. But that vastly, vastly understates the real issue that we've all been talking about being unsustainable. And just one piece of mathematical data to back this up. Congressional Budget Office just a few weeks ago came out with their annual budget overview, and they looked forward to the next 10 years. 10 years from now, in 2023, the revenues that the government will take in will be above the historical average, will be double what they were in 2012. Military spending will be at an 80-year low, and still the deficit will be almost $1 trillion. That is a snapshot of unsustainability.
Now, Michelle, the argument is that you can always try to grow out of this, and I think Bill Clinton reminded us of that, and of course it was cushioned by an internet boom, the likes of which we hadn't seen in some time. You can have a boom like you had during the Reagan years. My point is, you can grow your way out of this. Is he also saying that in this environment, it is hard to picture a boom of that magnitude to pay for all of this?
Yeah, it's absolutely unsustainable. We need to make some real cuts. They're making such a big deal about these sequestration cuts. Come on, this is not a real cut at all. If this was really as bad as they're making it sound, Obama would not be out golfing. These aren't real cuts. This is not going to make a difference. What we need are actual cuts to entitlement programs. We can't just keep spending all this money that we don't have.
Well, I could say the same of the Democrats and Republicans, that they both have to hit their sacred cows, but there's a reluctance to do that. But Michael, your thoughts?
Well, I think what we have to convince the American people is that the idea that we can just tinker and cut and snip like we've been doing and manage to get by for the last 50 or 60 years, that path is not an option. And people sit there and go, why not? We've always been able to do that. But as Reinhardt and Rogoff's books, This Time is Different, states, we are at a different point in time. 78 million baby boomers, 10,000 a day, 1 every 8 seconds, going into that system, on a pay-go system. It just doesn't work anymore.
Guys, I want to thank you all.